Filmmakers have been making movies about the future for as long as the medium has existed, some more fantastical and some more accurate than others. That being said, for every prophetic film out there have been dozens that have completely, objectively missed the mark in almost every single way. Now, you might be saying, well, these are mostly just works of art and not trying to profess any sort of prophetic knowledge of the future. To that we say, fine, that might be true, but where's the fun in taking such a measured and reasonable approach? Nope. Instead, we've come together to bask in the painful, funny, shocking, and entertaining ways in which movies have gotten the future dead wrong. Coming up are the top 10 movie predictions about the future that, well, just didn't happen. First up at number 10 in our roundup of the top 10 movies that have completely failed in their predictions for the future is the awesomely entertaining, cheesy, JCVD Jean-Claude Van Damme action sci-fi B-movie classic, Time Cop. Little known fact about this movie is that it was actually based on a pre-existing comic series published by Dark Horse, highlighting the fact that Hollywood has been mining old IP for a lot longer than you might think. But back on to where this movie starts getting things wrong. Released in 1994, the film itself was actually set in only 2004. The biggest flub is also one of the central concepts of the movie, time travel. Apparently, in just a short decade, not only was time travel going to be invented, become possible, but also become quite widespread and then abused as a get-rich-quick scheme by unscrupulous evildoers. Not only were there time machines around, but also the so-called time cops. Yeah, as cool as that might seem, unfortunately we don't recall seeing anything on the news about time travel back in 2004 or 2014 or today. On the other hand, the movie did accurately predict the advent of voice-controlled driverless cars. Now, it's true we didn't have them back in 2004, but now with Google and other companies' advances, we're finally getting pretty close to that future now. The number 9 spot in our top 10 roundup of movies that got the future completely wrong is the literary movie classic 1984. Now, most guys will probably know this movie as the book you were forced to read in high school, and even at that, probably most of you were too lazy to read it anyways and just watch the movie. Now, the movie and the book are probably one of the best examples of a plausible dystopian future, particularly where it seemed precinct with its regard to government surveillance. In 1984, Big Brother is always watching, either through the omnipresent telescreens or indirectly by getting children to police their parents. There's some pretty clear parallels you can draw between the Big Brother of 1984 and the recent disclosures of the NSA's mass surveillance of Americans. That being said, some of the bigger predictions of 1984, such as the world being divided into 3 superpowers constantly at war into Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia, didn't come true. Thankfully, we can rest easy. Up next at number 8 in our top 10 roundup of the films whose predictions were utterly wrong is a classic not only of sci-fi, but of cinema itself. Stanley Kubrick's famous 2001, A Space Odyssey. This is another film in our list based on a book, this time written by sci-fi master Arthur C. Clarke. Now, this film is undoubtedly a beauty to watch and chock full of hidden meanings, as well as actually faithfully predicting some of the insane tech that would eventually come to be. Think in-seat TV entertainment, voice recognition software, and video phones, as well as space stations and spaceships shaped like planes. Bear in mind that the film came out in 1968, so it was definitely way ahead of its time. That being said, despite some of his accurate predictions, Kubrick's faith in our technological competence to build a sentient AI was somewhat misplaced. The closest we've come to a HAL 9000 is probably Siri in our iPhones or Cortanga in the Windows devices. Yeah, I don't think we have to worry about an AI taking over anytime too soon. Sliding into number 7 in our roundup of the top 10 movies which have completely flubbed their predictions of the future is an absolute must for any Kevin Costner fan out there. Sometimes described as a neo-western, this film was directed and starred in by Kevin Costner himself. Hey, if you want to do something right, you have to do it yourself, right? Well, in this 1997 epic, Kevin Costner stars as the eponymous Postman, struggling to deliver mail in a world ravaged by an unknown apocalypse, and a 2013 where the US Postal Service no longer exists. Similarly to other posts in this top 10, this film was adapted from a 1985 book by David Brin. In his book, you find out that the apocalypse wasteland was caused by a series of EMP blasts across the world. Fortunately for us, both the book and the movie got it wrong on almost all counts. Thankfully, the mail service is still up and running, losing packages as the norm, but as far as we remember, 2013 was pretty lacking in worldwide EMP blasts. Next up at number 6 in our list of the top 10 movies which missed the mark with the futuristic predictions they predicted is John Carpenter's Escape from New York. This 1981 film is a cult classic and is one of Kurt Russell's defining roles. In the film, Kurt plays a former special ops soldier turned criminal who was forced by the government to mount a suicidal rescue attempt for the US president, whose plane crashed in the middle of Manhattan Island and is turned into a giant maximum security prison. Now, if that description didn't sell you on the film, then I'm sorry to report you have no soul. It's a lot of fun. Go check it out. That being said, the film gets a few things super wrong. First of all, it's set in 1997, and apparently a giant war between the United States and the USSR is coming to an end. The reality was that the Soviet Union actually had fully collapsed only 10 years after the film came out, by 1991. The next glaring issue with this film, contrary to what some people may say, is that Manhattan never turned into a giant max security prison controlled by gunboats and mine bridges. Number 5 in our roundup of the top 10 films whose predictions about the future completely failed has to go to the cult B-movie classic Death Race 2000. This 1975 film starred a super slick David Carradine as Frankenstein, who might be more machine than man, and there's also an appearance from a young Sly Stallone. The film thrilled audiences with its campy take on an ultra-violent future dystopia. That being said, it got a number of things seriously inaccurate. First off, it's in the title that the film features the invention of a new national sport, the transcontinental death road race, where contestants gain points for getting the fastest time and for mowing down innocent pedestrians. Thankfully, the year 2000 came and went, and no such murderous and bloody sport ever came into existence. And finally, another prediction made in the film is that following an oil crisis in 1985, both the Republican and Democratic parties collapsed, allowing the rise to power of a fascist dictator called Mr. President. So far, for good or worse, it seems we still have both parties fully intact. The number 4 spot in our top 10 list of films that got the future absolutely inaccurate goes to one of the films from the original Planet of the Apes series. Spoilers ahead, but given the fact these films are decades old at this point, we think it's fair game. The premise of the series is simple. Basically, apes take over the world and humans become their slaves. As far as apocalyptic films go, that one's definitely a downer. When it comes to failed predictions, though, there's two that really stand out. The ape takeover part notwithstanding. The 1972 film Conquest of the Planet of the Apes shows a future where in 1983, a strange disease has wiped out all cats and dogs, forcing humans to start keeping apes as pets. It's safe to say that all pets around the world are very thankful this movie got this one wrong. To make matters worse, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes also shows that in 1991, humans have switched to relying almost fully on ape slave labor to fuel their economy. Ape factories are still nowhere close to being a reality, but industrialists can dream, we suppose. Next up on our comprehensive list of movies that completely inaccurately predicted the future is the backwards apocalypse special effect-laden disaster porn film 2012. John Cusack stars as Jackson Curtis, a normal family man who tries to lead his family to safety in the midst of a geological and meteorological super disaster. The plot makes little sense, with the end of the world being brought about in the year 2012 due to neutrinos from a massive solar flare bombarding and superheating the Earth's core. Well, luckily, the world is still spinning, neutrinos are not. The film also plays heavily with the idea that the apocalypse was predicted by the Mayans through the Mesoamerican long count calendar. Let's chalk that up to another miss for the film, as 2012 came and went with no world-ending cataclysms. Finally, the film depicts the governments of the world working together in 2010 to start construction on 9 mega-arcs aimed at saving humanity from the inevitable global flooding. Wonder where those mega-arcs are now. Careening into the number 2 spot of our roundup of cinema's biggest mistaken predictions about the future goes to Will Smith starring in I Am Legend. Will Smith plays the role of Dr. Robert Neville, a former US Army doctor and scientist who is the last person left alive after a genetically re-engineered measles virus, touted as a cure for cancer, mutates and kills off 90% of humanity. The remaining 10% who were infected turn into murderous vampire-like creatures who live in the absolute darkness. The film's story picks up in 2012, but the deadly virus actually wiped humanity out and created these vampiric creatures back in 2009. Last time we checked, humanity is still around and vampires exist only in the movies. Boy, are there a lot of them. The film also depicts a desolate and abandoned Manhattan following the forced military evacuation of the island. Well, 2012 came and went without any evacuations taking place, so that prediction is kind of busted. And finally, at the top of our list of the top movie predictions that failed to come true is the whole Terminator franchise. Yeah, those Terminator movies like to play with timelines, even if the recent one, Terminator Genisys, tried to hit the reset button and pretend that Terminator 3 and Terminator Salvation never actually happened. Yet, technically, Skynet should have taken over the world by now, regardless of whether it was supposed to happen in 1997, 2004, or 2011. Seems like Judgment Day is really kind of late. And while we're at it, the franchise also predicted that we would be making killer humanoid robots with weird Austrian accents. Given that that's supposed to happen still in the future, we have to give that one a pass.